Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Not just ignored, but actively erased, as if your very presence was a smudge on a pristine canvas they were trying desperately to scrub away. I remember the exact sound of the wind rattling the heavy glass panels of my high-rise apartment on the north side of Chicago. It was a Tuesday evening in late October, exactly 10 years to the week since the night my life was shattered. I was sitting at my kitchen island, the polished white quartz cold beneath my forearms, sipping a cup of black coffee that had gone lukewarm. In front of me was a dual-monitor setup displaying a massive, interlocking spreadsheet of international shipping manifests. At 26, I had built a life out of numbers, variables, and predictable outcomes. As a senior risk and data analyst for an international logistics firm, my entire job was to look at chaos, find the hidden leverage, and quietly neutralize the threat before it cost the company millions. I liked numbers. Numbers didn't lie. Numbers didn't harbor cruel favorites. And numbers never looked you in the eye and told you that you were no longer their daughter. Then the intercom buzzed. It was a sharp, intrusive sound that sliced through the low hum of my refrigerator. My doorman, Arthur, spoke with his usual polite, gravelly cadence. "Ms. Vance, there is a Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Vance downstairs in the lobby. They claim to be your parents. They don't have an appointment, but they are quite insistent." For a full 30 seconds I didn't breathe. The name Arthur Vance felt like a heavy, rusted anchor dropping straight into the pit of my stomach. I looked down at my hands. They weren't shaking. 10 years of surviving on my own terms had cured me of the instinct to tremble. "Let them up, Arthur," I said, my voice sounding flat, even to my own ears. "And give me exactly 7 minutes before you send the elevator." That was the moment everything shifted. I didn't panic. Instead, my analyst brain took over. I looked around my 3-bedroom apartment. I looked at the second bedroom down the hall, the one I used as a home office and library. I looked at the absolute silence of my home. My parents were coming up to see the teenage failure they had thrown out into a freezing Illinois winter a decade ago. But more importantly, they were coming to see the phantom child they believed I had given birth to. They were coming for a grandson. And in exactly 7 minutes, I had to decide how to give them exactly what they deserved. To understand why my parents were standing in the lobby of my luxury building, you have to understand the family dynamic that defined the first 16 years of my life. My father, Arthur Vance, was a senior partner at a prestigious corporate law firm in the Chicago suburbs. My mother, Eleanor, was a woman whose entire existence was curated for social media, charity galas, and the country club newsletter. They lived in an immaculate 5-bedroom colonial home in Lake Forest, surrounded by manicured lawns and high iron fences. In that house, appearance wasn't just important, it was the only currency that mattered. And from a very young age, it was made clear that my older sister Victoria was the primary investment. Victoria was beautiful, compliant, and possessed the kind of effortless charm that wealthy parents love to display like a trophy. She was groomed for a high society marriage and an Ivy League education. I, on the other hand, was Clara. I was the quiet one, the one who spent her time in the basement fixing broken radios, coding basic software, or reading old manuals. While Victoria was given a $45,000 Sweet 16 party at the country club, my 16th birthday was commemorated with a quick text message from my mother and a $50 gift card to a local bookstore left on the kitchen island. "Clara is just independent," my mother would tell her friends over $72 plates of pasta at their weekly luncheons, her tone dripping with subtle disappointment. "She doesn't really fit the family aesthetic, but we do our best." The exploitation was quiet, but it was constant. If Victoria needed her college application essays edited, I was expected to stay up until 3 a.m. doing the research because Clara has nothing better to do. If my father needed his digital files organized for a major case, he would hand me his laptop without a word of thanks, expecting perfection because you're the tech person in this house. I was the unpaid staff, the safety net for Victoria's failures, and the ghost in the background of their family Christmas cards. But the real cruelty was the emotional isolation. I remember sitting at the dinner table on my 16th Christmas. Victoria had just been gifted a brand new white Jeep Wrangler. The keys were wrapped in a massive red bow. When I opened my single box, it contained a set of heavy wool socks and a book on time management. "We think you need to focus on being more productive, Clara," my father said, barely looking up from his prime rib. "Victoria has a very busy social calendar, so we need you to be available to help your mother around the house more often next year." What they didn't know was that I was already planning my escape. I was studying, accumulating certifications online, and saving every dollar I could find from tutoring local middle schoolers. But life doesn't always wait for your spreadsheets to line up perfectly. In the autumn of my sophomore year of high school, a brief, poorly chosen relationship with a boy from the wrong side of town resulted in a positive pregnancy test. I was 16 years old, terrified, and holding a plastic stick that read pregnant in the middle of the night in my pristine ensuite bathroom. I made the mistake of trusting them. I thought that despite the coldness, despite the favoritism, a crisis would finally make them act like parents. I was wrong. It happened on a Thursday evening in mid-October. I had asked to speak with them after dinner. We sat in the formal living room, a space filled with expensive, uncomfortable silk-upholstered furniture that no one was actually allowed to sit on unless we had guests. Victoria was upstairs on a FaceTime call, her laughter echoing down the hallway. I placed the positive pregnancy test on the mahogany coffee table. It looked incredibly small and stark against the polished wood. My mother looked down at it, then up at me. The look on her face wasn't shock or worry. It was absolute visceral disgust. "What is this, Clara? Is this some kind of sick joke?" "I'm pregnant, Mom," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I'm scared. I don't know what to do." My father stood up. He didn't yell. His voice was a freezing, lethal whisper that was far worse than screaming. "You miserable, selfish little girl. Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you know what this will do to my standing at the firm? To Victoria's social prospects? We are weeks away from the autumn gala, and you bring this filth into my house." "Arthur," my mother gasped, her hand flying to her pearl necklace. "The neighbors. If anyone finds out, we won't be able to show our faces at the club. The Harrington family is already looking at Victoria for their son. We cannot have a teenage bastard in this family. Please," I begged, tears finally streaming down my face. "I need help. I need to go to a doctor." "You will not go to a doctor in this town," my father said, stepping toward me. He picked up the pregnancy test with a tissue, as if it were radioactive, and threw it into the wastebasket. "You have ruined everything we've built. You are a stain on this family, Clara. And I will not allow you to drag us down into the gutter with you." That was the moment the door slammed shut on my childhood. My father walked to the front closet, grabbed my winter coat, a cheap, thin jacket from 2 seasons ago, and threw it at my feet. "You want to live like an adult? Go live like one," he said, opening the heavy front door. Outside, a bitter Chicago wind was already bringing the temperature down toward freezing. "You are no longer a part of this family. Don't call us. Don't come back. You are disowned." "Arthur, wait, her clothes." My mother started, but she wasn't trying to save me. She was worried about the logistics. "She has what she deserves," my father snapped. I remember the exact sound of the heavy oak door clicking shut behind me. It was a solid final sound. I stood on the manicured driveway of my parents' Lake Forest home with nothing but my phone, my wallet containing exactly $42 from my tutoring cash, and the thin jacket. I didn't cry anymore. The cold air cleared my head instantly. I walked down the long, winding driveway, out past the iron gates, and began the 3-mile walk to the nearest metro train station. That night, I caught a train into the heart of Chicago. I slept on a plastic chair in the 24-hour waiting area of Union Station, holding my small purse tight against my chest, watching the commuters rush past. I was 16, completely alone, and according to the world I had absolutely nothing. But as I watched the sun rise over the dirty glass windows of the station the next morning, I realized something vital. They had taken away my home, my family, and my security. But in doing so, they had also taken away their power over me. They couldn't threaten me anymore. The worst had already happened. That first winter in Chicago was an exercise in pure, unadulterated survival. When you are 16 years old, homeless and pregnant, the world does not extend a helping hand. It looks at you with a mixture of pity and suspicion. I ended up at a youth shelter on the south side called Covenant House. It was a bleak, concrete building that smelled constantly of industrial bleach and cheap institutional chili. But it had a bed, a lockbox, and a social worker named Marcus who didn't look at me like I was a broken piece of trash. What my parents didn't know was that the baby they were so terrified of, the child they thought would ruin their pristine country club reputation, never even made it to the spring. It happened during my third week at the shelter. I remember waking up at 3:15 a.m. to a sharp, blinding pain in my lower abdomen. The bathroom floor was cold, gray linoleum, lit by a flickering fluorescent bulb that hummed like a dying insect. I sat there alone, bleeding, weeping silently into a wad of cheap paper towels so I wouldn't wake up the other girls in the dormitory. Marcus found me the next morning and took me to the county clinic. The doctor, a tired woman with deep purple bags under her eyes, held my hand and told me what my body already knew. The stress, the malnutrition, the sheer trauma of being cast out into a freezing Illinois winter had taken its toll. The pregnancy was over. When I walked out of that clinic into the gray Chicago drizzle, I felt an emptiness that I still can't fully describe. But beneath that emptiness, something else was hardening. Cold, calcified resolve. The child was gone, but the narrative my parents had created about me, the narrative that I was a ruined, desperate teenage mother, was still very much alive in their minds. I decided right then that I would let them keep believing it. I would let them think I was out here struggling with a child, while I quietly built an empire out of their failure. I spent the next 2 years working 12-hour shifts at a 24-hour diner near Union Station, pouring coffee for tired commuters and scrubbing grease off griddles until my fingernails bleed. But every night from midnight until 4 a.m., I sat in the corner booth with a cracked, donated Chromebook, teaching myself advanced Python, data structures, and statistical analysis. While my sister Victoria was busy attending sorority galas and spending my father's money on $5,000 weekend trips to Miami, I was earning my GED, followed by a series of high-level Google and Microsoft data certifications. By the time I turned 21, I had landed an entry-level logistics role at a mid-sized shipping firm. I didn't have a prestigious degree, but I had something far more valuable, a terrifying, obsessive work ethic born out of starvation. I could analyze a supply chain bottleneck in 15 minutes that took an entire team of Ivy League graduates 3 days to figure out. Within 3 years, I was headhunted by one of the largest international logistics conglomerates in the Midwest. By 24, my salary was firmly in the multiple six-figure range. I bought my high-rise apartment on the north side cash-free with a massive down payment, filled it with minimalist, expensive furniture, and watched the city of Chicago sprawl out beneath my floor-to-ceiling windows. I had a life built on absolute precision. My parents thought they had left me to drown in the gutter. Instead, I had built a fortress. And that should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Chapter 5. The Smell of Desperation and Trust Funds. 10 years after the heavy oak door in Lake Forest slammed behind me, my parents were standing in my living room. When the elevator doors opened and they stepped into my foyer, I didn't offer them a drink. I didn't smile. I stood by my quartz kitchen island, my arms crossed, watching them take in the sheer luxury of my home. My mother, Eleanor, looked older. The lines around her mouth were sharp, tightened by a decade of forced social smiles, and she was clutching an authentic Chanel handbag like it was a life preserver. My father, Arthur, had lost the arrogant posture he used to hold at the head of the dinner table. His shoulders were slightly rounded, his expensive tailored suit hanging a bit too loosely on his frame. "Clara," my mother gasped, her eyes welling with tears that looked remarkably well rehearsed. "Oh my God, look at you. You're magnificent. We've searched for you for so long." "No, you didn't," I said, my voice cutting through her performance like a scalpel. "You knew exactly where I was the moment I bought this apartment, and my name registered on the property deed 3 years ago. You didn't come because you missed me. Why are you here, Arthur?" My father flinched at the use of his first name. He cleared his throat, taking a step forward, his eyes darting around the apartment as if looking for signs of a child. "Clara, please. We made a horrible mistake 10 years ago. We were blind, we were stressed, we were worried about things that didn't matter. But blood is blood. We want to make things right. We want to see our grandson." "Your grandson," I repeated, a cold amusement washing over me. "Yes," my mother pleaded, taking a step closer. "Victoria." "Well, Victoria had some medical complications, and she and her husband can't have children. And the family estate. Clara, your grandfather's trust fund is very specific." And there it was, the hidden variable. The numbers finally started to make sense. Through my professional networks, I had heard whispers that my father's law firm had taken a massive financial hit during a botched malpractice suit 2 years ago. But the real kicker was my grandfather's estate. Old Harrison Vance had been a strict, old-school patriarch. He had established a $14 million irrevocable trust fund, but the bylaws were draconian. The bulk of the estate could only be unlocked and distributed to the next generation if there was a male heir to carry on the Vance family name before my father's 65th birthday. My father was turning 65 in exactly 2 months. Victoria had produced no children, and her husband had recently managed to bankrupt their joint accounts through bad crypto investments. My parents didn't want me. They didn't even want a grandchild. They wanted the $14 million that was about to vanish into a charitable foundation if they couldn't produce a living boy with Vance blood. They thought I had a 10-year-old son out there somewhere, the bastard they had thrown into the snow. "We know we were cruel," my father said, his voice dropping to that desperate, pleading pitch that wealthy men only use when they are about to lose their wealth. "But if you let us into his life, Clara, we will secure his future. The trust will give him millions. It will give you millions. We just need to meet him. We need to introduce him to the trust executors next week." I looked at them. They were completely at my mercy, blinded by their own greed and the lie they had told themselves for a decade. What they didn't know was that there was no boy. There was only a cold, dark night in a shelter bathroom 10 years ago. "He's at a private boarding academy in Wisconsin right now," I lied smoothly, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "He comes back for the weekend on Friday. If you want him to meet the executors, it will cost you. I want a full written apology signed by both of you, and I want an immediate transfer of $250,000 into my personal account as a good faith gesture before I even let you breathe the same air as him." My father didn't even hesitate. "Done. I'll have my assistant wire the money tomorrow morning. Just let us see him, Clara. Let us save this family." "We'll see," I said, walking to the door and holding it open. "I'll call you Friday afternoon." The moment the elevator doors closed behind my parents, I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I walked over to my laptop and opened a specialized digital roster for Chicago-based talent and casting agencies. If my parents wanted to play a high-stakes game of corporate fraud and emotional manipulation, I was going to give them a masterclass. Through my logistics work, I had connections with several commercial production companies. Within 2 hours, I had contacted a reputable, high-end casting director I knew from a corporate marketing project. I told her I needed a young actor for a private, highly confidential corporate simulation exercise. A corporate role-play to test family wealth management logistics. It was a bizarre request, but in the corporate world, wealthy people do strange things with their money all the time. By Thursday morning, I had looked through 20 portfolios before I found him. His name was Leo. He was 9 years old, had sandy blonde hair that matched my own childhood photos, and possessed a remarkably calm, professional demeanor for a child actor. He had done several commercials for major insurance companies and local banks. Most importantly, his mother, a sharp, pragmatic woman named Sarah, was completely fine with the arrangement once she saw the legal contract I drew up and the $5,000 consulting fee I offered for exactly 3 hours of work. On Friday afternoon, Leo and Sarah arrived at my apartment. I had spent the morning transforming my minimalist living room. I bought a few expensive high-end children's books, a half-assembled Lego set of a Porsche 911 which I scattered artistically across the rug, and a couple of framed photos of Leo that Sarah had provided, which I slipped into silver frames on the bookshelf. I sat down with Leo at the kitchen island, giving him a glass of apple juice while his mother watched from the kitchen. "All right, Leo," I said, treating him with the same professional respect I gave my junior analysts. "Here's the script for this afternoon. These 2 older people are going to come in. They are very wealthy and they are very nervous. Your name for the next 2 hours is Ethan. You don't have to say much. You just need to be polite, tell them you love reading and soccer, and when they ask you about your school, you tell them you love your history class. Can you do that?" Leo looked up at me, his eyes sharp and intelligent. "Are we playing a trick on them because they were mean to you?" I paused, looking at this little boy who was about to play the ghost of the child I had lost. "Yes, Leo. They were very mean to me a long time ago. And today we are going to make sure they can never hurt anyone again." Leo nodded solemnly, taking a sip of his juice. "Okay, Clara. I'm ready. I'm really good at playing nice characters." At exactly 4 p.m., the intercom buzzed. Arthur and Eleanor Vance were downstairs, accompanied by a man in a sharp gray 3-piece suit, the senior trust executor for the Vance family estate. I looked at Leo, who was sitting on the rug, carefully clicking a black Lego piece onto the chassis of the toy car. "It's showtime," I whispered.